I want you to notice the sermon title, The Road to Patience. Now, you've heard it said, be careful what you pray for. This week I've added, be careful what you plan to preach on. Because as the week began, I had a really good plan of how this week was going to go. After missing the marriage retreat last weekend due to Evan and then me being sick, I was looking forward to this week. But remember, I was preaching on patience. So last Sunday night, I still wasn't feeling very well. So on Monday morning early, I texted a doctor in our church, and as soon as they opened, his office called in prescriptions for me to get me back healthy. But it would take 4 trips to the pharmacy over 2 days to get those filled. Remember, preaching on patience. On Monday at lunch, Rebecca called to say that she was picking up Evan at school because he wasn't doing well. So she took him to the pediatrician since he had just been sick the week before, following up, and they decided they were going to admit him to the hospital. My text reply back to that was, oh, great. Remember, preaching on patience. Rebecca and I began making new plans. It's always stressful when that happens, you know, but we've done the we got to go to the hospital thing before, so we got this. We make the shifts. Mom's in play. Everything's going to be fine. Well, on Tuesday, I was in my car to get us some lunch, take it back to the hospital when my car started making weird noises. The engine light came on. Other things started binging and buzzing. I took a picture of my dashboard and I sent it to Rebecca and said, and I'm preaching on patience on Sunday. As I sat there wondering if my car might die right there, my prayerful wife texted back, the Lord just said to me, are you going to trust me or not? Well, we decided to trust the Lord, maybe because that's the only thing we could do. I want you to turn this morning to James chapter 5, verse 7 through 12 for a message entitled, The Road to Patience. We've all been down this road to patience as we face setbacks and conflicts, as we're taken advantage of or betrayed, as we're persecuted or passed over, as we deal with disappointments and defeat, as we simply wait for God to move and for prayers to be answered. We are faced with the same question that the Lord asked Rebecca and then laid on me. Will you trust me or not? The people to whom James was writing were facing persecutions of various kinds. Times were hard. The rich were pushing them down. The pagans were pushing them aside. But James says, be patient. Patience is an important characteristic of the Christian life. It's the first word used in the definition of agape love in 1 Corinthians 13, verse 4. Love is patient. It is the 4th fruit of the Spirit mentioned in Galatians 5:22. The fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, peace, patience. Patience helps you do right when you've been wronged. It helps you keep your head up when it's been pushed down. It helps you stand back up when you've been knocked down. It helps you have heart when your heart has been broken. It helps you hold back when you want to lash out. It helps you press on when you want to give up. The word patience results from the combination of 2 different Greek words. The first meaning far, distant, and long, and the other one meaning passionate and heat and anger. So you put those 2 together and you have that idea of patience or long suffering. But Max Lucado points out that the Greek word figuratively means taking a long time to boil. Think about that. When you get ready to boil a pot of water, the size of the stove doesn't really matter. The size of the pot can cause it maybe to take a little longer to boil, but really what matters is the size of the burner and how high it's turned up. How many BTUs are coming out of that thing? How it determines how fast that pot will boil. Well, patience keeps the burner turned down. Occasionally, we all need help keeping the burner turned down. And to people facing hardship, persecution, and the frustrations that go all with it, James tells us how patience is developed. And he tells us first that patience is developed by waiting. Look at verse 7. Be patient then, brothers, until the Lord's coming. See how the farmer waits for the land to yield its valuable crop, and how patient he is for the autumn and spring rains. Someone has said that patience is a virtue that carries a lot of weight, and that's W-A-I-T. There's nothing great about a waiting room. Anybody spent a few hours in a waiting room before? The chairs are not very comfortable. The coffee is stale. And even the old stacks of out-of-date magazines that used to be there that at least you could look through are now removed because of COVID concerns. A waiting room is a pretty abysmal place to have to be. And sometimes in life, it feels like God's put us in a waiting room. And we're just waiting for something to give. We're waiting for something to change. And God says, wait. The 19th century preacher Phillips Brooks said that this passage helps you know what to do when you are in a hurry and God is not, which to many of us may seem like every day. James says if you want to develop patience in waiting, you need to look upward to God. And he gives an illustration from farming. Now, according to 2nd century church father Clement of Alexandria, James and his brother Jude were farmers, so this illustration comes straight from their livelihood. In Israel, the fall rains come in October and November, and they soften the ground that has been scorched and dried out by the summer's heat. And then the spring showers come in April and May, and that's what causes the grain to ripen. The rains come, and the farmer just patiently waits for them to. But that, of course, doesn't mean that it's not hard to wait. Because there's that long period of time between planting and growth and harvest when nothing seems to be happening. Nothing on the surface has changed. The farmer must remember that things are happening, though, in the darkness of the ground beneath. In season, the rains will come according to God's plan. It does no good for the farmer to worry about the rains. He just has to wait. True patience is waiting without worrying. While we're waiting, we must look upward because God's works, He's working while we wait. There's a song some time ago that said, God is in the waiting. Look upward and focus on Him. If you focus on your situation, you might grow angry. If you focus only on yourself, you'll wallow in self-pity. If you focus on finding someone to blame, you'll become a complainer. If you focus only on the present, you'll forget what God's done in the past and you won't anticipate what He can do in the future. He wants to do many things, but if you focus on God, you will see the clouds developing long before the refreshing rains ever come. So patience is developed by waiting. But James also says patience is developed by standing firm. So with this image of the farmer patiently waiting for rains to come, James continues in verse 8, you too be patient and stand firm because the Lord's coming is near. Being patient is a decision. You must decide to wait on the Lord, to hold your tongue, to not lash out. There was a man who stopped in a grocery store on the way home to do some shopping, and he kept passing the same other shopper in the store as he was going. There was this dad who had an uncooperative 3-year-old little boy in the basket. Now, if you've ever had a 3-year-old little boy, you know exactly what that daddy was going through. Well, the first time they passed, the 3-year-old was begging for a candy bar, and the man heard the dad say, now, Billy, this won't take long. As they passed in the next aisle, the 3-year-old's whining had taken it up a couple of decibels, and now Dad was saying, now, Billy, calm down. We'll be done in a minute. When they passed the dairy case, the kid was screaming uncontrollably. But Dad kept his cool. In a low voice, he was saying, "Billy, settle down. We're almost done now." The dad and his son reached the checkout ahead of the other shopper and checked out and went on their way. The dad was still in control, but the boy was still screaming and kicking. And Dad calmly said over and over, "Billy, we'll be at the car in just a minute and everything will be all right." The bystander was pretty impressed. So after paying for his own groceries, he hurried to catch up with the dad and the little boy just in time to hear the dad say, "Now, Billy, we're done. It's going to be okay." So this other shopper tapped the patient father on the shoulder and he says, "Sir, I just got to tell you, I couldn't help but watch you in the store. And just how you handled little Billy was amazing. You were so patient. You just did great." The dad replied, "Well, thank you. But you need to know something. He's not Billy. I am." Ain't no telling what that kid got when he got home. Patience is a decisive act, right? We have to decide. Patience is developed when you make that choice and you stand firm in it. In the face of challenges, we must resolve, I will stand firm in the faith so I can gain patience. I think that's what helped Joseph. You know, Joseph's story is intriguing because that poor guy did not deserve all the mess that his brother's evil decision caused him. Out of jealousy, they sold him off to a bunch of merchants and then told their daddy that he had died. Who does that? And that evil act caused Joseph to spend years as a servant and then in prison. Finally, in the providence of God, Joseph went from the prison to the palace and became second in command of all of Egypt. And when his brothers came seeking help in the midst of the famine and found out that it was actually Joseph to whom they were having to speak, they were scared. But do you remember what Joseph said to them in Genesis 50, verse 20? He said, "You intended to harm me, but God intended it for the good that's happening right now, which is the saving of many lives." Standing firm in faith, no matter what comes at us, develops patience. Standing firm in the middle of a troubling time requires having some hope. In fact, the greatest hindrance to patience is a lack of hope. In the darkness of a difficulty, it's hard to see the light of hope. But James says, lift your eyes, look ahead. There's a light at the end of the tunnel, and this is it. Jesus is coming back. The second coming is the ultimate hope, because we know there's coming a day when the tears will end, when wars will cease, when victory will be gained, and when praises will be lifted. There is a poem that's been attributed to various people through the years. It seems to most often be attributed to a Rwandan man in 1980 who was forced by his tribe to renounce Jesus Christ or be killed. Well, this man refused to renounce Christ, and so he was killed on the spot. And after he died, someone supposedly found a poem that he had written the night before he died. And listen to how this man developed patience by standing firm in the faith. He wrote, "I am part of the fellowship of the unashamed. The die has been cast. I have stepped over the line. The decision has been made. I am a disciple of Jesus Christ. I won't look back, let up, slow down, back away, or be still. My past is redeemed. My present makes sense. My future is secure. I am finished and done with low living, sight walking, small planning, smooth knees, colorless dreams, chintzy giving, and dwarfed goals. I'm no longer in need of preeminence, prosperity, position, promotions, plaudits, or popularity. I now live by presence, lean by faith, love by patience, lift by prayer, and labor by power. My pace is set, my gait is fast, my goal is heaven, my road is narrow, my way is rough, my companions few, but my God reliable, and my mission clear. I cannot be bought, compromised, deterred, lured away, turned back, deluded, or delayed. I will not flinch in the face of sacrifice, hesitate in the presence of adversity, negotiate at the table of the enemy, ponder at the pool of popularity, or meander in the maze of mediocrity. I am a disciple of Jesus Christ. I must go until heaven returns, give until I drop, preach until all know, and work until He comes. And when He comes to get His own, He will have no problem recognizing me, for my colors will be clear. Patience is developed by standing firm. So look ahead. Jesus is coming. Next, James says patience is developed by staying positive. Look at verse 9. Don't grumble against each other, brothers, or you will be judged. The judge is standing at the door. When troubles come, we tend to grumble. We're going through a tough time, and we look around at others who aren't going through a tough time, and we think, why me? And why them? In fact, sometimes we even grumble against them. We decide that we want to tear them down because sometimes we think that's going to help us feel built up. And then we look for someone to blame for our troubles, and the pressure mounts instead of the patience, and that burner gets turned up, and the BTUs are blowing. There was this lady's car broke down on the expressway. And no matter what she tried, she could not get it to start. She just kept trying, and since it was rush hour, traffic built up quickly, and drivers were doing the best they could, just trying to find an alternate route or just wait it out. But everybody was doing that but one old boy in his big old pickup truck. He was laying on the horn, just letting her have it. So finally, after trying a few times to start a car, the lady got out of her car. She went back to the pickup, and she asked the driver to lower his window, and he did. And she said, "Sir, I'm so sorry, but I can't seem to get my car started. So if you wouldn't mind going and trying to start it, I'll be happy to get up in your truck and honk the horn for you." When pressure mounts, it's tempting to grumble and divide and honk the horn. It happens in marriages, it happens in families, it happens in churches, it happens anywhere 2 or 3 are gathered. So often we think it would be easier to split than to deal with the issues. But the split only creates more issues. In fact, in the long run, it would be easier to work hard for a season to fix today's issues than to spend the rest of your life dealing with tomorrow's issues. The patience with people is often the thinnest when someone is mad at God. Johnny Hunt says that impatience with God leads to impatience with God's people. Usually, and I've experienced this, when someone gets mad at a church, it's because they're mad at God. And so they take that frustration, instead of taking it out on God, they take it out on whoever represents God to them, the church or the pastor or the Sunday school teacher. So how do you avoid becoming like that? How do you gain patience in staying positive? Well, James encourages us to look up and notice that the judge is coming. The Lord who gave you life and provides everything for you is coming back. In fact, He's standing at the door. He can overhear you griping. Do you really want Him to open the door and find you complaining and grumbling and griping? Stay positive. Find ways to laugh in the face of trials. Patience is developed by staying positive. But patience is also developed, James says, by gaining inspiration. Sometimes when times are tough, you need a good example of somebody who's been there before. And that's what James tells us to do in verses 10 through 11. Brothers, as an example of patience in the face of suffering, take the prophets who spoke in the name of the Lord. As you know, we consider blessed those who have persevered. You've heard of Job's perseverance and have seen what the Lord finally brought about. The Lord is full of compassion and mercy. How do you develop patience? By gaining inspiration. You look backward to faithful people who've been there before. And James says, think about the prophets. Hebrews chapter 11 helps us to really see the prophets in just a quick kind of way, especially Hebrews 11, 36 through 38, where we read, some faced jeers and flogging, while still others were chained and put in prison. They were stoned, they were sawed in two, they were put to death by the sword. They went about in sheepskins and goatskins, destitute, persecuted, mistreated. The world was not worthy of them. You know, the prophets suffered not because they did something wrong, but because they did everything right. And yet they persevered. And yet they had patience. And so you can too, no matter what you're going through. James next mentions a man who is not normally grouped with the prophets, and that is Job. Poor Job went through it, and he didn't deserve any of it. The whole crisis, which involved the death of his loved ones, attacks on his physical health, bankruptcy of his business, was an attempt by Satan to get him to curse God. But Job would not do it. Job persevered. Now, did he struggle with patience and faith? Yes, he did. Did he grumble? Yes, he did. He even got so low he wished he'd never been born. But he still persevered. When we read Job's story about him losing everything and his horrible, no good, very bad day, we think, man, this is inspiring to me because no matter what I got going on, it ain't as bad as Job. But then we read the rest of the story. And we see that the end of Job's story is blessing upon blessing upon blessing. And that inspires us even more. We see that God is full of compassion and mercy. You know, sometimes God allows us to go through challenges so that He can use us in greater ways. A.W. Tozer said, it is doubtful whether God can bless a man greatly until He has hurt him deeply. Kent Hughes writes, there is a consistent link between the crucible and true greatness. David was hunted down by Saul. Jeremiah was thrown into a prison. Daniel thrown into a lion's den. Paul was in prison. I've yet to hear of a successful, effective pastor who's not had some kind of deep hurt in his life. Trials humble us. They purify us. They strengthen us in the faith. The psalmist wrote in Psalm 119, verse 67, before I was afflicted, I went astray, but now I obey your word. None of us like afflictions, but they make us who we are. If we submit them to God, they make us better. If we try to handle them ourselves, they make us bitter. If you need to develop some patience, gain some inspiration from someone who has persevered before you. Patience is developed by gaining inspiration. But finally, patience is developed by staying truthful. Look at verse 12. Above all, my brothers, do not swear, not by heaven or by earth or by anything else. Let your yes be yes and your no, no, or you will be condemned. Perhaps as a kid, you've said, in trying to prove your point, cross my heart, hope to die, stick a needle in my eye, right? Or maybe later on as a youth, you said, I swear to God. Or now as an adult, maybe you say, well, let me be honest. Or honestly. Do you know that whenever you use an expression like that, you're implying that every other time you speak, you're not being honest? James says to say what you mean and to mean what you say. We must have the sort of character that when we give our word, people know they can count on us. Now you think, what in the world does this have to do with developing patience? Seems out of place. Well, it's this. Truthful people will have people around them who can help them through trying times. People who are not trustworthy will find themselves alone when going through a difficult time. But people whose word is their bond will be respected and they'll be helped. How can you develop patience by staying truthful? Look around. and see the people who are standing with you because you stood with them. They could count on you. Now you can count on them. Patience is difficult. We don't want to pray for it. We don't really want to preach about it for fear that we might be reminded why we really need it. But Henry Nouwen wrote something helpful. He says, patience is not just waiting until something happens over which we have no control, like the arrival of the bus, the end of the rain, the return of a friend, the resolution of a conflict. Patience is not a waiting passivity until someone else does something. Patience asks us to live the moment to the fullest, to be completely present to the moment, to taste the here and now, to be where we are. When we're impatient, we try to get away from where we are. We behave as if the real thing will happen tomorrow, later, somewhere else. Let's be patient and trust that the treasure we look for is hidden in the ground on which we stand. Think about that farmer waiting for the rain to bring those seeds up out of the ground. Patience is developed every day by waiting, by standing firm, by staying positive, by gaining inspiration, by staying truthful. From where you are and standing today, look upward to God. Look ahead to Christ's coming. Look up and see that the judge is coming. Look backward at people who can inspire you on, and look around you to see that the people who are there with you, helping you to press on. There is someone to help you go another day. You can make it. Right where you are, listen to God. When everything's falling apart, listen to the Lord's question. Are you going to trust me or not? And when you choose to trust Him, He will get you through.